Okay, here is the Unit 1, Day 1, Number 2 lecture. So this one is day 3 of those, or page 3 of those notes, and it's about percent notation. So a big thing with percents is we don't put them into equations as the actual percentage. So say you wanted a sale 35% of 100, and you did 35 times 100. Well, that would give you 3,500. That's not much of a sale. So instead of percent always means that you divide by 100 before you actually put it in. So if I were to take that 35% and do 35 divided by 100, that's one way to write it. Or I could do 0.35 or 0.35, 0.35. So this would be how I put it in an equation, or this, just not as the percent itself. So then we've got 3 ways you can write a percent notation. You can write it as a ratio. That's the actual divided by 100. So 35% is 35 over 100. You can look at it a different way. If you want it in decimal notation, it's 35 times 0.01. And then you can look at it in fraction notation, where you're multiplying it by 1 over 100, or getting 35 over 100. So you've got any of those notations, just make sure that you do convert it. Now, an easy way to do it is if you're converting decimal to percent, you can multiply it by 100, move the decimal over twice. It becomes bigger. If you're going backwards, percent to decimal, move the decimal twice, but it becomes smaller. So essentially decimal to percent, you're multiplying by 100. So you're taking that decimal and going 1, 2. Whereas percent to decimal, percent, you're dividing by 100. So you're taking it and going 1, 2. Decimal to percent, number gets larger. Percent to decimal, number gets smaller. So here's just a few practice problems. There are several on here. You do as many as you need to do, and show them against the key. That's completely up to you. So if I wanted to convert 28% to a decimal and a fraction, how you want to do this order-wise is up to you. I'm going to first do that fraction notation. And then I'm going to do that decimal notation. And I end up with my 2 answers. Now, this one is technically not reduced. 28 and 100 are both divisible by 4, so you cancel those out and get your 2 answers. Now, if you want to do 28% and just move the decimal for decimal form, that's also fine. If I'm converting 27.5 to a decimal, I move it over. Now the fraction one looks a little different. For the fraction one, I want to do 27.5 over 100, or times 1 over 100. And then I'm going to move it over 1 spot by multiplying each piece by 10. So that gives me 275 out of 1,000, which I'm then going to reduce down to 11 over 40 by dividing by their common number. And again, take time to go through these, make sure they make sense on your own. This one, if I want to write it as a decimal, I go 1, 2, 3.575. If I want to write this as a decimal, 1, 2, 0.3478. So again, 1, 2 over, there's your percent to decimal. And then the next one I want to look at, ending off the notes, would be converting fraction to percent. So if you want to divide or convert a fraction to percent, easiest thing to do, take the fraction and just divide it in the calculator, then move the decimal to or multiply by 100%. So if this is something, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? Just divide it in your calculator. Use your calculator, and you would get 0.4375. Then multiply that by 100% to get 43.75%. This one, you could use a calculator too. You just need to make sure to do the top first. Don't type it in as is, or it'll give you something odd. And again, type that right in. And there you go. And you are now done with day 1.